what is, when we look at the president's physique, but he's a 74-year-old who's clinically obese and snorts Adderall. We don't know that. That's just a claim. But seriously, what is the prognosis here? And then I understand he's now got a experimental treatment, was just announced an hour ago at the taping of this on Friday afternoon. And of course, we wish them all the greatest speedy recovery, et cetera. But let's get into the facts here.
I think the overall mortality rate for someone of his age is in, call it the 2 to 4% range, right? And for someone with he's not known to have diabetes or high blood pressure, but generally you can kind of say there's some risk factors maybe associated. So a couple points. But the reality is the treatment that he got is one that's not available to the public, and is effectively like creating these, taking these antibodies to the coronavirus. And he got 8 grams of this immunoglobulin therapy that is basically a bunch of antibodies that will eliminate the virus. And they're not widely available. They're not publicly available, these treatments. But, based on the early trials and the general experience with using synthetic and, polyclonal antibodies for infectious disease like this, pretty effective, and he should kind of, recover pretty quickly, I would imagine. Chamath, did you see the letter they published on what he's getting? So they
Go ahead and read it. Go ahead and read it, Friedberg.
The doctor published. It was not too long ago, right, Jason? I saw it on your Twitter.
It just happened like an hour ago. I tweeted it. Yes. If you
so he got 8 grams of polyclonal antibodies. This is the Regeneron formulation. So basically, they've isolated the antibodies that neutralize coronavirus that patients have presented in their body. And then they use recombinant DNA technology to produce those antibodies synthetically. So it's a bunch of antibody proteins. And then they turn it into an injection, into a formula that they can put in your body. And you now have effectively neutralizing antibodies. So they gave him 8 grams, which is a pretty high dose. And it goes in intravenously. You can have sometimes an allergic reaction to that, but it seems like he was fine from that because they didn't announce an allergic reaction. And then, the antibodies are now in his bloodstream and they bind to the virus. So any virus that's floating around immediately gets wiped out. It gets eliminated from the body. So theoretically, this is the way we should treat all infectious disease.
That's my point.
And I do think that, by the way, and I've written about this, I think that is the future of infectious disease, is we're all going to get a polyclonal cocktail every year. Instead of getting a flu shot, you get a bunch of antibodies to all the new stuff that's emerging, and it wipes everything out.
Think about this, David, just think about this. There was so much raging debate that got politicized between the left, between the right, between different folks of people who believed in different things around what the right course of care was. There was no single source of truth. I'll just say this again. When you treat the president of the United States and he gets better, that is canonical single source of truth. I'm sorry, but there can be no debate after that the smartest people with the access to all of the research. I mean, let's be clear. You don't think a call went out last night before they deployed the nuclear warhead stuff to all of the R&D labs and all the big pharma companies and said, what do you got? And the answer came back at the top of the ticket was this Regeneron cocktail?
Yeah, they definitely had made that call before to prep for this, but yeah, right. Totally agree. Right.
Now, when you say
by the way, it highlights what the future of infectious disease treatment is and should be, which is that all of us should be getting a booster shot every year of synthetically produced antibodies that will counteract any new infectious disease floating around in the world. And we're getting to the point in the next 10, 15 years that should be reality for everyone.
Well, I think it highlights that, but it also highlights that in the absence of the most powerful man in the world getting this sickness, that we're all going to basically bitch and point fingers about what the right solution is. And so it can't be the case that the next time there's a crazy illness that's floating around in society, we need to go and target, 5 or 6 of the leaders of the G8, plus the Pope, plus this, plus that, Beyonce, heaven forbid. You know what I mean? Like, this is crazy. Yeah. This can't be how we find single source of truth.
Yeah. Well, I think politically speaking, I think there's a lot of upside here for Trump if he does get better in a week. I mean, if these polyclonal antibodies work, then, and he emerges from the White House, fit as a fiddle in a week, he's going to say the cure is here. I was right. Yeah. We don't even need a vaccine. The cure is here. It's over. And all the I told you so's might flip around.
How far off would that be from the truth, David?
Well, if the polyclonal antibodies work, I mean, then it's just a matter of scaling them.
Can it be scale, Friedberg? Is this easily scalable?
Yes. But by the way, I'll just point out the challenge with this is a lot of people, north of 15%, will have, because antibodies, remember, they're a protein. And if your cells didn't make that protein, they look like a foreign protein when they show up in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And so very often when you get a foreign antibody treatment like this, you will have some sort of allergic reaction because your body will react and attack that protein. And so it's not as simple as just saying, hey, we should just scale this up and give it to everyone, because the clinical trials that are going on with it are to figure out what percentage of people, what's the right way to treat people, what's the right way to protect them from anaphylactic shock, all that sort of stuff that comes along with this sort of thing. So it's not that simple.
But Friedberg,
we're making it up.
But Friedberg, yeah. you would admit that many of those questions, the answers to many of those questions must have been well in hand, because there's just zero way.
Oh, Regeneron's been running these trials since March. 100%.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
right. I can tell you for sure, when Trump got this treatment, I guarantee they gave him Benadryl and they gave him a steroid shot, and they probably gave him a little bit of cortisone, or they had it on the side. Because that's kind of like the standard sort of regimen you would use when you get this sort of, synthesized or convalescent plasma type treatment. And, he comes out of this thing on the other end and he's fine. But that treatment regimen is required. So it's, you sit down in an IV booth and you get a fucking IV and you get shots to go along with it. So it's not as simple as just shipping it out to everyone's home and giving them that treatment, And
am I correct that only 300 or so people have gotten this to date? Is that correct with the trial?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I know that convalescent plasma, which is, call it the poor man's version of this treatment, which is instead of synthesizing the antibodies, you're taking the actual antibodies from other people that have had COVID and recovered. You're isolating those antibodies and you're injecting them in other people's bodies.